Okay. I think I don't see anybody else streaming into the door, so let's get started. I'd like to introduce you to the first of our three speakers, and I'm going to take questions between the speakers. I think that was a nice format I saw in our last session, so we'll do that. Presenting on printers devices in esoteric publishing is William Kiesel, Publishing Director of Ouroboros Press, publisher of classic texts on Western esotericism. He is the founder and host of the International Esoteric Book Conference, which held its 8th annual meeting in Seattle in September. And he's participated in the antiquarian and scholarly book trade since 1991. William is also co-editor of Clavis, Journal of Occult Arts, Letters, and Experience, and his book, Magic Circles in the Grimoire Tradition, was published by Three Hands Press. Please join me in welcoming William.
Good afternoon, everybody. I had a great time at the book fair yesterday. It's always a pleasure to spend time with other book lovers, and I had a few monographs left over about the printer's device that I wrote, and there's some over here. So if you'd like one, please feel free to take one. They're complimentary. Now today I'm going to talk about the printer's device and just touch on the different forms that it's taken, both historically and in contemporary times, particularly focusing on esoteric publications. So I think most people know that printer's devices are sort of coming out of the tradition of trademarks, branding, and that sort of thing. And during the Middle Ages, the trade guilds would use these kinds of marks to brand cattle, to mark crates, and gold workers would use these marks to not only identify who the maker was, but as a sign of quality. And most people probably know Aldous Manutius's device with the anchor and the dolphin. And the thing about this device that's fascinating from an esoteric point of view is an alchemical saying, which is festina lente, make haste slowly. And this device sort of exemplifies that with the lead weight of the anchor juxtaposed with the swiftness of the dolphin. So the first device that we find in printing history, of course, is Fust and Schiffer's dual shields, which appeared in their Psalter of 1457. I believe it should be loading up here. So Fust and Schiffer took over the press that Gutenberg invented, and their device was a pair of shields showing emblematic devices. And the idea of using shields on printers' devices was drawn from a heraldic tradition. And you'll find that there's often the device utilizes that motif. Maybe I'll try and just reload this. Yeah, it's okay. We'll get it figured out here. Yeah, let's try it again. That's okay. So if you look in the pamphlet there, you'll see some of these early devices. And I'll just try to get this presentation going here. Yeah.
All right.
Well, as you know, at the book fair yesterday, I was speaking to my fair partner who was next to me, and he was talking about things that came up in some of his printing situations where spirits had gotten involved. So maybe they're just reminding us that they're here.
Oh, excuse me, we got our IT person here still having loading problems.
I think it's. I think we got it. I think we got it covered. There we go.
Yay.
This is fine. This is fine. Thank you. Okay, so here's Boost and Schiffer's device. I think most people have probably seen this. It's a device that was often emulated, as we see here, by the example of Jan Veldener's device of 1475, and also co-opted by Penguin with their imprint, Pelican imprint, when they put out their book about printing history. So devices like this took different forms. Sometimes they were monograms, sometimes they were sigils, as in this example, Nicholas Jensen. And these sigillate devices, like the shields, printers would often emulate each other. And there are many different examples of this orb and cross variant that carried out throughout the Renaissance period. Here's another example showing both the shield motif and the monogram. You can see that the monogram sort of been sigilized, and behind the shield is the wild man. This is Reinhard Beck's device from Strasbourg. Now, another source of influence for these devices came from house signs. And all throughout the European continent, house signs were a wayfinding device for people to locate different locations. And you'll even see in colophons, the printer will say, at the house of, in this case, at the sign of the Great Golden Mortar. So you can see the sign hanging below the middle shield there, and it's a large mortar that's depicted there. But also, the printer has his printer's mark on the left shield, and this is Adrian van Bergen's printing establishment, which was in Antwerp. Printer's marks were often emblematic, as emblemata were quite popular during this period and could be accompanied by a motto or a canting mark. A canting mark is a device which employs imagery that plays on the printer's name. Let's see, we need this to forward. There we go. So this is, oops. So here we have the device of the Berkman brothers, Arnold and Franz. Now the Berkmans had several bookstore firms. Their principal firm was Unter der Fetten Hennen, which is among the fat hens. So their house sign was actually a large hen with some chicks, as you can see again on the shield motif here. They purchased this place in 1511, and that same year Franz married Gertrude Amersfoort, who was the daughter of Gerhard Amersfoort, another bookseller in Cologne. Now, Franz had many connections in European cities, and he traveled around in order to address the affairs of the firm. Meanwhile, Arnold tended the bookshop back home. Here's another particularly large device that the Berkman brothers employed, again using the shield and sigil motif. On the left side, we have the arms of the city of Cologne, and then on the right was the Berkman brothers device, and then the threefold saints represented here. This is from the opera of Saint Cyrillus, 1520, and we see three separate scenes: the Adoration of Saint Ursula with the 11,000 virgins, and a boiling cauldron containing the 7 Maccabean youths and their mother. And in the upper corners, again, the shield motif is evident. So I was talking about canting marks before, and often you'll see in the Berkman devices this birch tree, which is what Berkman literally meant, birch. So often the hands would be accompanied by these trees, the birch trees. Now, the Berkmans were particularly known back then. Printers and booksellers were often one and the same. And the Berkmans published esoteric works. In this case, we're looking at an alchemical work by Raymond Lull. Here's another Raymond Lull work that the Berkman brothers produced. And in this case, they used a variant of the printer's device that shows the binding of Isaac. Let's look at that one for a second. The binding of Isaac was used on several of their works during a few years. And these kinds of works by Raymond Lull, Paracelsus, and others that they published were purchased by people like Elizabethan Magus John Dee, who was spoken about earlier today. And Dee was actually a patron of theirs for many years. One of their patrons commented that he had seen Dee in their bookshop 40 years prior. And also, when Dee had been traveling around Europe during the 1580s, he had an outstanding bill with the Berkman brothers that he hadn't paid off, which I'm sure quite dismayed him when he returned to find his library burned at Mortlake. So the Berkman brothers had great influence in Europe, and among their colleagues was Johann Froben at Basel. And Froben was another printer whose device is an intriguing one, showing 2 hands emanating from clouds holding a caduceus, which is surmounted by a dove. And Froben's motto to go along with his device was, "Be ye wise as serpents and harmless of doves." Now, Froben, of course, became famous due to his printing of Erasmus's works. And this happened directly because of the Berkman brothers, who took Erasmus's manuscript to Froben to be published. Here's another example of Johann Froben's caduceus device on the title page of one of Erasmus's works in the British Museum. Now, the serpentine device of the caduceus was one that was often used by printers. Here we have Erhard Ratdolt's device showing Hermes holding the caduceus. And another one, Johann Wellcome. So close up, see Hermes holding the caduceus there with the owl on top. Again, the shield motif is being held in his left hand, and the sigil of the printer is on the shield. There's another example from Leipzig, 1774, showing the printer leaning against his printing press. Hermes is handing him the caduceus, and also the publisher has his device stamped on his crates that are tied up and bound there at his feet. So why Hermes? Why is Hermes' device showing up in so many of these? Well, Mercury in Hermes was a messenger of the gods. Not only was he known as the patron of merchants and mercantile activities, he's also the god of writing and magic. In fact, all gods of writing and magic, those two subjects go together with those gods, as in, say, Thoth of the Egyptian mysteries or Odin in the Northern mythology. To whom Thoth was the voice of the gods and the originator of speech. And with Odin, he had his vision where he was tied to the tree and had his vision of the runes. And so writing and magic are tied together. And Hermes was the patron of these subjects. Now here's an example of an early design that I did for the Esoteric Book Conference, originally the idea was I was going to start an Esoteric Book Guild with the idea of getting my colleagues to come together and work together and collaborate, because as you can imagine, publishing esoteric books is a very small niche market. It really is a small world, and so I've managed to bring together quite a number of people to network and communicate and just show off what we do together each year. And I based this device, the idea on this device, on several others that I'd seen through my studies, and the final version was rendered by Benjamin Bierlin. So I reached out to each of my colleagues and asked them if they would share their printer's device and explain what it was that inspired them to use the devices that they did. And this monograph over here is the first effort at trying to catalog this particular genre, literary genre of esotericism. Now, the kinds of books that these printers put out range from historical works like the ones that I do that are classic source material texts, to contemporary works based on older ideas. And the devices are just as diverse as the texts themselves. And the thing that's intriguing to me about printers' devices today is, of course, fine press printers use them quite often, but they're not as popular in larger publishing establishments as they used to be. But the esoteric publishing world, they all have their device, they all have reasons why they use them, and the means through which they show up is fascinating. I spent some time compiling these and requesting information about them, and quite a few of them do have serpents. There's a lot of them with eyes. There's lots of them with crosses, and I think that publishers of esoterica are drawn to the printer's device because of the emblematic nature and because of the symbolism that you find in the subject matter itself. Most of these publishers were happy to share the information about their press and about why they chose the device that they did, but I did receive a few responses, we'd rather keep that secret. So be that as it may, I've decided that I do want to gather together as many of these as I can, both from contemporary works and historic works. And so this is just a first effort on my part to gather these together. One particularly great resource to know about in studying printers' devices is the University of Florida. They have a wonderful online database that is a collaborative site, so you can add to the site yourself. And they've managed to, in the recent past, add to their database the database of printers' devices from the University of Barcelona. So it's really quite an extensive site and worth investigating. But when I went there to research my talk and put this monograph together, there were very few esoteric publishers represented there. And not surprising, again, it's a very small niche, but I think that given the renaissance of esoteric publishing that's going on in recent decades, I thought it was a fun and interesting way to approach the subject. So if anybody has any questions, I'd love to take them.
Yeah, I was curious to know whether you've come across any esoteric devices in watermarks, because that would seem to be, the right place, right, to put that information.
Well, curiously, again, at the book fair yesterday, Peter mentioned to me this 2-volume set that I was unaware of that talks about the esoteric symbolism of watermarks. I haven't seen that 2-volume set, but I would imagine that is an avenue worthy of research. Anybody else?
Have you got any insight into why esoteric publishing is getting a little push these days? It's been more popular in the last few years.
Well, one thing is, I think the technology that we have, desktop publishing, of course, has really made it an accessible endeavor for folks. And if you think back to the 80s during the zine revolution, if you will, I think that modern print on demand is the new zine revolution. There's a lot of publications that are coming out in very small numbers, but it's quite easy to do. You can upload a PDF to these different companies and they'll ship you a printed book. Maybe not nicely printed, but certainly better quality than the Xerox zines that we saw in the 80s. So when I think about these publications that are coming out today in the esoteric world, there are quite a few that are printed on demand. It's intriguing. I think part of it stems from the influence that media had on the current generation that's coming into the publishing world. During the 80s, during the 70s and 80s, there was quite an interest in the occult. And it's just technology has made it available. It's the convenience of printing is really at our fingertips. And some people, utilize that just like the zines of the 80s, but other people are still continuing to do fine press and letterpress and finer editions, which is what I try to do and some of my other colleagues try to do. I think Grendel addressed some of that in her talk. And I think another part of it is financially motivated. I think the prices that some of these books are commanding on the rare book market is engendering some of the interest. There is a lot of new material coming out, some of it better than others, some of it obviously just an attempt at making a quick buck. But it is interesting nonetheless because it is printing. It's all people inspired by the idea of creating a magical book. And there's something about book collectors and people who study esoterica. They tend to be, there's a lot of overlap there. Most people who are interested in esoterica are also book collectors. And certainly I see it at my conference every year. It's a small conference, about 300 people show up, and we've got several dealers, but boy, the crowd is well informed, and they really love their books. Anyone else? Yes?
It seems as though contemporary publishers use the printer's marks to characterize their ideas or what they're doing. But the earlier publishers, some of whom Probin was an esoteric publisher, and then the earlier ones like Aldous or Fuston Schiffer, took these printer's marks possibly from brands or something. There's no manuscript tradition that I know of printer's marks, obviously. What do you think is the difference between the earlier use of those and now in terms of thinking about printing?
I think it's true. The earlier devices from the Renaissance definitely derived from the tradition of trademarks. And that's just as true today. People want to be recognized for their work, but I think there is a more of a feeling of meaning behind the devices that these publishers have chosen. Like for instance, on the screen here on the upper left, we have a circle with an inverted T. This is from Titan Press, originally founded by Martin Starr, and it's a facsimile publisher that does facsimiles of Aleister Crowley books. And this device represents the magic circle, and the magic circle is the center and circumference. So everything that is within and everything that is without is demarcated. And I would say that esoteric publishers specifically use these devices and have esoteric ideas in mind when they present them, because they want people to know the kinds of works they publish, or they want to engender a certain kind of idea about the works that they publish. Anyone else? All right, thank you very much.
queue up our new speaker here. So thank you, William. That was great. Our second presenter, Robert Cagna, will speak on secret engraving marks and other mysterious printing on postage stamps. I think you all got a little packet on your seats. Robert is the library director at West Virginia University's Charleston Division and former head of Access and Document Delivery Services at the University of Pennsylvania Biomedical Library. Robert has served on the board of SHARP, the Society for the History of Authorship, Reading, and Publishing, and has spoken at the American Library Association's Rare Book and Manuscript Section pre-conference, as well as the American Philatelic Society. Please join me in welcoming Robert.